Today's music sucks. That's something you've heard at least once lately. You might have even said it yourself before. But is music really the only thing that's changing? 120,000. That's how many songs are released every single day. Each one has its own story behind it, its time and effort put into making it, as well as the experience needed to make it good. But did you ever think when listening to a song, wow, music is getting boring nowadays, every song sounds the same? Did you ever see an artist you love put out a track and while you were expecting something great, it eventually turned out to be just mediocre? So, is music actually getting more boring despite the 3.5 million songs released every month? Alright, let's try to take a step back. Try and think about that one specific song you used to love when you were younger. You will naturally think of good times, for example, that one time when you were with your family on that road trip and you first heard it, or that one time when you were with your friends and it started playing. Songs from your childhood will, most of the time, carry all the memories you made when growing up. For example, try to think about the song from the movie Up, Married Life, you know the one. If you were to listen to it by itself, you'd probably call it a generally good song. However, by knowing the context it's in, like the story of these two children who end up getting married, loving each other, and then as they grow up, they realize that time goes on no matter what we do or feel. It's a wonderful work of art. This is to show how, as movie soundtracks are made special by the movies themselves, there are some songs special to us that are sort of soundtracks of our past selves. So many S's in this script and I just got new braces. However, these good times weren't necessarily good. We just remember them as so. There is a concept known as rosy retrospection, which means that we see past things through rose-tinted glasses, which means in an overly optimistic way. We remember happy memories more easily than negative ones, and since our brains feel rewarded when positive emotions come through, they will keep on seeking those memories, hence artificially improving those times. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this proverb, but it's a saying that goes 90% of everything is crap. Its coiner, Theodore Sturgeon, an American science fiction writer, used this very sentence as a response to critics who derided science fiction, describing it as low quality. What he meant by 90% of everything is that in every field, not just science fiction, most work is considered to be below average, and only 10% of it is worth noting. This could be applied to music too. We have a lot of songs that we would not consider to be on par with the rest of the good songs, but they also help us appreciate that small 10% of good songs. Which brings me to my next point. Another reason why we perceive that music is getting boring nowadays is that we are constantly seeing waves of new releases by artists, and while most of them are good, it's hard for them to be memorable. Recently, this phenomenon has seen a huge growth thanks to an exponential increase in the number of producers, which I believe was greatly aided by the pandemic. This has led to many debates about whether music is actually getting more boring as time goes on. However, if you were to ask others, when did music start dying, you will always get a different answer. And that's because there isn't a right answer. Music isn't dying and will never die, only evolve. When you look back and think about how music was like 5, 10, 20 or even 50 years ago, you will most likely remember the most iconic sounds of the time, and not the song done by the small band in your neighbor's garage. On the other hand, when you consider today's music, you will naturally think of both top-notch artists and smaller ones. I think you can start to piece together what I'm trying to say here. Comparing the best songs from some time ago with recent, less popular ones done by less experienced producers is like a football match between a top-tier team with like 30 hours of training per week and hundreds of people at their service, and the local middle schoolers Thme. Of course they don't stand a chance, it's not a fair comparison. One very important difference with how music distribution worked back in the day is that it's way easier now than it was back then to get your music published and spread throughout the internet. There are many services which cost close to nothing, considering that everything you invest into getting your music published will eventually be refunded to you through royalties, that just allow you to upload your song, and in a matter of days it's out on every single platform. This is of course an amazing thing because it means there is way less gatekeeping in the music industry than there was back then. Anybody is able to publish their song and make sure that anybody in the world can hear it. However, it also means that there will be a lot more mediocre songs out there, which reinforces my earlier point. An even bigger problem, in my opinion, is that as there are more and more artists, each with their own creativity, it's way harder for a newcomer to be able to stand out. In fact, it's more difficult now than it was back then for someone to come up with their own sound, because the chances of sounding just like anybody else are way higher. This last part is very near and dear to my heart, as is basically the goal of most of my videos, and that is that famous music doesn't mean good music, and vice versa. When you look for music, it's often easier to just let an algorithm recommend you songs that other people are listening to, because there's a higher chance that the song you're currently listening to is one that you're going to like. It's almost like choosing where you want to eat, not based on the fact that it's a good or a bad restaurant, but only because it's well rated online. But here's the thing, and it's something I will always stand by. There will always be great music for the right listener. There is so much good music just waiting to be explored. The only difference with the main ones, the more famous ones, is the play count. So, instead of listening to the same songs, try using new methods. For example, the way I like to do it is to just go into the feed of my SoundCloud followed artists and to listen to what music they recently published, or even better, recommended by reposting. It's way better and a lot more fun, to be honest, to get some good and not even necessarily famous music recommended to you by your favorite artist. And if I'm looking for a sound similar to a specific song, there's always the station button, which recommends songs similar to the one I'm looking for, and it does a pretty good job. But if you really want to look for underground music that no one else in the world has heard of, just to be able to brag about it in front of your friends, don't worry, I got you. For example, a very good website I found is called Forgotify, which recommends songs from Spotify that have close to 0 plays. And while it usually recommends songs that are like 30 years old or something, or classical music, sometimes it happens to find that one specific good jam. And on a similar subject, there's also Thme, which does pretty much the same thing but with more modern songs. That's how, for example, I discovered this song right here that you're currently listening to, and it's called Remote Memory Palace, done by Thme, and I really recommend the whole album. You can check the link to buy it in the description. So you, listen to this video, go to that little restaurant that opened a few weeks ago, and maybe while you're going there, try to listen to some new music.